The cherry red lights flooded the rearview mirror of the luxury sedan, sharp and sudden. In that instant, the driver's identity was stripped away. He was no longer Judge Julian Croft, a man with 2 decades on the bench. In the eyes of the trooper approaching his car, he was just a black man at a rest stop on I-94. And that was apparently enough. Judge Croft placed both hands on the steering wheel, plain to see. "Good morning, officer," he said calmly as the trooper reached his window. "You can tell me why you pulled me over." The trooper, Officer Cade Cobb, sized him up, his gaze lingering on the expensive suit before meeting the judge's eyes, a flicker of contempt. "We have a bolo," Cobb said, his voice flat and devoid of respect. "Stolen vehicle, matches this description. Fancy car, fancy suit," he thought. Must be a drug dealer or a pimp. The accusation was absurd, but the judge kept his composure. "This is my vehicle, officer. The registration is in the glove compartment. I can get it for you." Cobb completely ignored the offer, taking a half step back as his hand went to the grip of his sidearm. "Get out of the car," he barked, the pretense of procedure gone. It was a raw command. Judge Croft had seen enough defendants in his courtroom to know that arguing on a highway shoulder was a losing game. He opened the door and stepped out slowly. As he straightened up, a second cruiser screeched to a halt behind his. Officer Shepard got out just as her partner Cobb shoved the judge against the trunk of his own car, smearing road dust onto the fine fabric of his suit. "I have a right to know the crime I'm being accused of," the judge stated, his voice even and firm. He would not give Cobb the satisfaction of seeing him rattled. Cobb paid him no mind. He turned, reached directly into the private vehicle, and began rummaging through the judge's belongings, tossing papers from the passenger seat with disdain. A cold knot of fury tightened in Julian Croft's gut. "Officer," he said, his voice cutting through the air, sharp and precise, "I do not consent to a search of my car." That was all the excuse Cobb needed. "Obstruction," he snarled, spinning back toward the judge. "You're interfering with an investigation." Before Croft could react, Cobb wrenched his arm behind his back with punishing force. Cold steel bit into his wrist as the first handcuff clicked shut. His partner Shepard hesitated for a split second before helping him secure the other. The judge didn't struggle. He didn't yell. He simply met the officer's gaze and held it. "You are making a catastrophic mistake." Out of the corner of his eye, he saw a young woman filming the entire scene with her phone. Good. The back of the cruiser was a cage of surreal humiliation. 20 years of service to the law, erased in an instant. In Cobb's world, he wasn't a judge. He was just another caller. But as the cruiser sped away, Julian Croft wasn't just angry. He was calculating. Officer Cobb had no idea who he had just arrested, but he was about to find out. This was not going to end the way he imagined. For over 90 minutes, Judge Croft sat on a hard plastic chair in the Stone River precinct. The cuffs were off, but the angry red marks remained on his wrists. His ID was on the desk, but no one had bothered to actually read it. His calm demeanor wasn't seen as the discipline of a judge. It was interpreted as the cold defiance of a criminal. They denied his request for a phone call. They offered no explanation. They just left him there to wait. 3 times he asked to speak with his office. 3 times he was met with silence. Other officers glanced his way as they passed, their faces etched with smirks. The suit, the shoes, the way he carried himself, it didn't command respect here. It bred contempt. He heard one of them mutter to another, "This one thinks he's hot stuff." The judge gave no reaction. Finally, Officer Cobb sauntered over, leaning against the doorframe with his arms crossed. His face was a mask of smug satisfaction. "All right," he began, his voice dripping with condescending sarcasm. "You ready to tell us what you were really up to back there? Casing the place for a score?" Judge Croft looked up at him, his expression unreadable. "I was on my way to a meeting in the Capitol. I stopped to check my phone for directions. That is the entire story." Cobb let out a short, ugly laugh. "Sure, you people always have a story, don't you?" The slur hung in the air, deliberate and poisonous. The judge held his tongue. He knew this game. Cobb was baiting him, trying to provoke an outburst that would justify his actions. He'd seen this exact tactic used on countless men from the other side of the bench. He refused to become another statistic for Cobb's file. A short time later, a woman with sharp, intelligent eyes and graying hair pulled into a tight bun, strode into the room. Sergeant Eva Nowak. Her gaze swept the area, missing nothing, and she stopped dead when she saw the judge. "How long has this man been sitting here?" she demanded of the room at large. 90 minutes, maybe more." a desk officer replied without looking up. Obstruction. Sergeant Nowak's brow furrowed. She walked directly over to the man, her expression serious. Sir, were you read your rights? I was, Sergeant, the judge answered, but I have been denied my legal right to a phone call. She studied him then, a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. Something in his tone, the lack of fear, the precision of his words gave her pause. State your name for me, please, she said. Julian Croft, he replied. And I strongly advise you to run that name through your system before this situation escalates any further. From across the room, Cobb chuckled. He's been playing the big shot card since we brought him in, Sarge. Don't fall for it. Sergeant Nowak shot him a look that could have frozen lava. That's enough, Cobb. She turned on her heel and walked to the nearest computer terminal. The judge watched her back as she began to type. He didn't need to see the screen. He just needed to wait for the exact moment her posture would go rigid with shock. And then it happened. Sergeant Nowak rose from the computer, her face a pale, unreadable mask. She walked back toward the holding area, her steps measured. Cobb was still leaning against the wall, a smug grin plastered on his face. Sergeant Nowak unlocked the door. You mentioned a meeting, she said, her voice now stripped of all familiarity. It was formal, tight. Yes, the judge replied. A Justice Reform Roundtable. With the governor. She took a shallow breath, the pieces clicking into place with horrifying clarity. And you are Judge Julian Croft? He gave a single, deliberate nod. I am. The air in the precinct crackled and then died. Every sound, every movement ceased. Your Honor, Sergeant Nowak said, the words cutting through the thick, sudden tension. On behalf of this department, I apologize. This is an inexcusable failure. Cobb bolted upright from the wall. Wait, what? Your Honor? The smirk was gone, replaced by a gaping, slack-jawed confusion. Sergeant Nowak turned to face him, her eyes blazing with a cold fury. You arrested a sitting state judge. You performed an illegal search of his vehicle, and you denied him his constitutional right to counsel. Her voice was low, each word a hammer blow. Cobb, do you have any earthly idea of the damage you have just done? The color drained from Cobb's face. His entire world had just shattered. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The other officer, Shepard, stared at the judge, her face as white as a sheet, looking like she was about to be sick. The silence in the room was absolute. Nowak turned back to Judge Croft, her expression now one of weary, frantic professionalism. Again, Your Honor, my deepest apologies. We can provide an escort to your meeting immediately, or you can use my personal phone right now. The judge gave a small, tired nod. The phone call will be sufficient. Thank you, Sergeant. As Nowak personally escorted him from the holding area, the entire atmosphere of the precinct had transformed. The smirks were gone, replaced by downcast eyes and the frantic shuffling of papers. Officers who had ignored him moments before now stared intently at their desks, avoiding his gaze at all costs. A heavy cloud of humiliation and fear hung over the room. Judge Croft walked out of that building with his head held high, Sergeant Nowak at his side. And every single person they left behind knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning. By early evening, it was a firestorm. The video from the student's phone had gone supernova on social media. The clip was short, brutal, and undeniable. A calm, well-dressed black man in handcuffs, being accused of obstruction by an aggressive state trooper. It exploded from a few hundred views to millions in hours. News outlets seized the story, splashing the judge's official state portrait next to a grainy, pixelated screenshot from the video. The contrast was a gut punch, and the public outrage was immediate and overwhelming. Hashtags demanding Cobb's badge trended nationwide. The governor's office, scrambling to control the narrative, released a blistering statement promising a full and transparent investigation. By the next morning, a crowd of protesters had gathered outside the Stone River precinct. What seemed to enrage people most wasn't just the arrest, but the look on Judge Croft's face, the profound, unshakable composure. People saw a man who wasn't just being wronged. He looked like he had witnessed this exact brand of injustice his entire life. He had instantly become a symbol for a disease so deep it could ensnare even a man at the highest level of the legal system. Inside the precinct, the fallout was swift and brutal. Officer Cobb was placed on immediate administrative leave and pulled into an emergency internal affairs review. Officer Shepard, they said, was shaken and cooperating fully. Sergeant Nowak was now the primary liaison with the State Attorney General's office. The viral video was now mandatory viewing for the entire department, a digital monument to their failure. The smirking in Stone River had officially stopped.